right now in the library of the Museum Haus Konstruktiv, and I've done a piece in this museum a couple of years ago. The piece would have no, or would run on an audio guide. So you would come into the museum, and at the entrance you were offered to take an audio guide, and there were numbers in the whole museum, not only in the exhibition rooms, but also in the staircase, in the cafe, in the library where we're sitting right now, and at different places of the museum. And then you could enter the number you would see in front of you at a certain point in the audio guide, and then you would hear a short text. It would be either French or English or German. It was not translated. And in this way, you could activate your own parcours in the museum. And it's interesting because people took it very differently and activated this piece in a very different way. What interested me with this piece is that, of course, it reflected on what is an artwork, what is a piece at all. Having this kind of presence and infiltration in the whole museum, where also much more traditional work of arts were shown, like more traditional exhibition of paintings or installations or whatever. I mean, pieces which had a materiality which my work didn't have. On the one hand, the kind of materiality you more expect to see when you see an artwork, but on the other hand, it would let you engage with the piece in a different way and have a different kind of awareness of your being here and of you activating the piece with this device of the audio guide. And it was very important to me also to have this kind of old-fashioned audio guide where you really press the buttons and then enter, that you really have this physical act of activating the piece. The work didn't have the kind of usual materiality of a work of art you expect maybe when you go to a museum. I mean, even if it's not new to have immaterial art. And what you would hear in the audio guide, maybe that's also another important point, is it's a collection of texts which I've selected specifically for this situation, or for this piece at the Museum Haus Konstruktiv. And I've selected this text. It was mostly text fragments, which I have either written myself or which I have taken from different source material. It could be literature, novels, it could be poetry, it could be artist statements, artist books, or also art theory. So a very broad spectrum. But it's kind of an intuitive archive that evolved through time and that I make out of my readings and out of my encounters with different kinds of text. And when I find a sentence which I find interesting, or which I think, oh, this is something I wish I would have written, then I just write it down, and I have this collection of texts and of fragments which evolves thus through time, and which I take as a starting point and which I reuse and rewrite and for different pieces. So out of this intuitive archive, I've made a selection which I thought was appropriate to reflect the different aspects of the Museum Haus Konstruktiv. As an art institution, as an architectural building, as this building in this city. I mean, the different aspects of what makes the Museum Haus Konstruktiv the museum house constructive was important to me. The piece ran over 2 exhibition periods, which means that between the first and the second exhibition, the piece evolved because the conditions in the museum, for instance, the first exhibition, it was a Vasarely exhibition, and in the ground floor, the windows were left open, and so I had one number on a window which was reflecting on this situation with a window. And for the second exhibition period, there was a projection in this same room, and so the windows were covered, it was all dark, and so I had to change the position of the numbers because they were not working anymore. It was not possible to have them at the place I had them anymore. And so I made a completely different piece by repositioning all the numbers and having different focus then in the whole building. And then I realized that there is a certain kind of plasticity in this piece, that it can evolve with the museum and with the own life of the museum and follow it. And so the texts that I had chosen were abstract enough that they could adapt to different situations which were taking place in the museum. This is something which is also very important to me in this piece, the idea that a specific text can have different meanings depending on the way you read it and on its position, on its embodiment and concrete situation. So that, I guess, the piece was as well about this very basic question of how language function and how meaning is being produced, as about the conditions of an art institution such as the Haus Constructiv, as about how, as a viewer, you position yourself in such an environment and how you stand to this environment where you come to see art. For me, art, it's just like philosophy. When you say you're doing art, is when you say you're doing philosophy, it can be, it's so broad that it can mean a whole, many possible things, and there is no one single answer to it. But what I find interesting in a work of art, it's very much linked to a situation. I guess I never, or what interests me in a work of art is how something works and what it tells me in a given situation, and how it fit in a given context. What interests me in a work of art is it's that something happens, and that something happens in a way that the question whether it is art or not becomes completely irrelevant. So there is this quality of happening, of erscheinen, of something which occurs, which is for me very decisive in I guess, where I can say, oh, this is art, but there is no relevance, no point in saying this, because it's something which has this kind of immediacy in the happening.